What's going on, everyone? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. It is the 19th of September, 2023, and on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the Eagles win from last Thursday night. We're finally going to get around to talking about that, as well as talking about the other storylines around the NFL, because there was quite a lot to dig into. So before we get into the show, please hit that subscribe button. If you're following us on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, give us that 5-star review. It really, really helps the podcast grow. It takes 2 seconds if you're listening to this. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram. All our handles are in the description below. If you're watching us on YouTube, I got the show's handles right here for you. And other than that, we can just get right into it. So to start off the show today, we're going to talk about the Birds and the Vikings. Obviously, they played on Thursday night, so it's been a little while that we've had to digest the game. But I'm probably pretty much going to do the week recap probably every Tuesday, including the Thursday night games, just so we have all the games behind us. All the standings are updated, and everything is kind of everything's up to date. So we have the full information ahead of us as we're kind of diving in and talking about the games and everything. So to start off, let's just talk about the Birds game for a little bit. They win 34-28 over the Vikings at home opener, to move to 2-0. So they're 2-0 right now at the top, or they're tied for the top of the division lead with the Cowboys and the Commanders, both who sit 2-0, and the Giants are in fourth place at 1-1. So only one of two divisions with multiple teams at 2-0. The other division, shockingly enough, is the NFC South, although two of those 2-0 teams have played the Panthers, who are 0-2, so, call it what you want. But the NFC East is the other one with 3 2-0 teams. The only other 2-0 teams in the league are the 49ers, the Ravens, and the Dolphins. So most of them reside in the East and in the NFC South. But in the East, it's gonna be a dogfight, man. The Cowboys look absolutely phenomenal. We'll get into that game in a little bit, but we'll talk about the Eagles first. And another game in which it wasn't pretty. It wasn't smooth throughout, but they got the win. At the end of the day, they got the win. It felt pretty much, although they only won by 6, it felt pretty much like in dominating fashion. And they still gave it back to the Vikings with 10 seconds left, down by 6. It's just like they're punting back to them, and we saw what happened in the Jets game week 1 against the Bills. For the Eagles to lose a game that way would have been extremely demoralizing, to say the least. So the fact that they were able to pull out the win was very, very encouraging. The first point I'll really get on here is the play calling of Brian Johnson. Once again, week 1 wasn't phenomenal, but obviously his first week, New England Patriots defense on the road in a monsoon. I'll give him some credit for getting the Eagles to win, putting us in enough position to score enough points to win the game. Thursday night was a completely different story. Just the first quarter game plan was atrocious, to say the least. I mean, I'm pretty sure we threw the ball the first 6 or 7 plays of the game. And when you know that's happening as a defense, it is so much easier to defend against the offense. When you know that they're going to be throwing the ball, there wasn't even a threat to the run. It wasn't even like they were play action. It was just straight dropbacks. And it was so frustrating to watch, because it's like they'll run. When they finally did run, they ran 3 times in a row. Their first 3 runs, it was like first down, 8-yard carry, 10-yard carry. And then they throw it again for the next 10 plays. And it's like, it's frustrating, because the identity of the Eagles has, and as long as Howie Roseman is the general manager of the Eagles, will always be the offensive line and the run game. It's just as simple as that. I mean, when the Eagles got really going in 2021, it was the run game. Even last year, although Jalen Hurts had a phenomenal passing year, he still didn't light up the scoreboard, or light up the stat sheet in terms of passing yards. A lot of it was on the ground. The team, even though, they did it by committee, which a lot of teams do now, they still ran the ball extremely effectively. And it was so frustrating because it was like every single carry the Eagles were doing were ripping off ginormous runs. And they just refused to stick with it. And I don't know what happened. I don't know who made the call. I hope it was Nick Sirianni and said, get your head out of your butt and start running the GD ball. Like, my goodness. Thankfully they ended up running it. I mean, it was beautiful to see, honestly, when they finally decided to go strictly with the run, and throw it every now and then, and trust that they can do it. But the running game was unbelievable. They ran for 259 yards. If that sounds crazy, it's because it is. 259 yards on the ground is ridiculous. That is just, as a team, that's unbelievable. Nick Sirianni said anytime the team rushes for over 200 yards, the offensive line gets the game ball, and they absolutely dominated. The Vikings defense had absolutely no answers for the offensive line. And from what I've heard, from when I listen to guys talk like Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, all these guys, Brandon Brooks, some of the old Eagles offensive linemen, obviously Malata, Dickerson, like these guys, Isaac Sayamalu last year, like they want to go forward. They want to go hit people. They don't love dropping back into pass protection and waiting for someone to get a running start at them. What they want to do is they want to put their weight on someone. They want to lean on someone and push people off the line. And when you run the ball, you allow them to get in a rhythm, to feel in the game. Because when you're pass blocking the whole time, it's so much harder of a game. It's so much harder on their bodies. And in terms of just like a conditioning aspect and all that stuff, obviously when you're running and you're hitting, it's obviously collisions, but at least you're doing the damage. Like, they always say when you're heading a soccer ball, don't let the ball hit you, hit the ball. And you rarely feel it when you head the ball. But when that thing hits you in the face and you're not ready for it, that thing hurts. And it's just like the same thing with the run game in football. When you're going to hit someone, it's different than when Micah Parsons is coming at you full steam and hits you in the chest. Like, it's different. So when you're actually able to put your footprint down and really just push them off the ball, it's a beautiful sight. And you saw exactly what happened. Then that opens up the deep threats. A.J. Brown scored a touchdown that got called back because of a holding. Devontae Smith, obviously the one deep ball was in the first quarter, but then his touchdown was off, a third down after they had been running it. The safeties come up. And that's what you get when you continue to run the ball. The safeties come up. Everyone, they know they got to help out. The linebackers take an extra step up because they think, hey, it might be running. And that's when the play action becomes so effective. That's when Jalen Hurts can become so effective because he can manipulate the defense with his eyes and with the play action. And it helps him so much because it takes one less thing away. If you're just catching it, stepping back, the linebackers can see the offensive linemen are just stepping back. And if they can see the ball, they're all right, we're going to drop into our zones. We're going to take our mans, and the safeties will do the same thing. And then you don't get those deep throws. So when you run the football effectively and efficiently, then the linebackers, the safeties have to come up a little bit. And then that's what creates the one-on-ones downfield. And I'm not saying anything new. Obviously, I'm not a coach. I don't know anything, but that is the recipe to get those deep shots, especially with a team that is so dominant running the football that the Eagles are. I mean, 259 rushing yards. Are you kidding me? Specifically and individually, DeAndre Swift went absolutely crazy. He had 28 carries, which for an Eagles running back is ridiculous. They were dealing with some injuries in this game. Regardless, 28 carries for 175 yards and a touchdown. Absolutely phenomenal on the ground from him. Even Boston Scott, before he left this game with a concussion, went 5 for 40, was just ripping runs off. It didn't matter who it was. Even Rashad Penny, I mean, he barely played. 3 carries for 9 yards. Obviously not great, but I know I can think of at least one of his carries off the top of my head got stuffed behind the line. So you're talking about he was still able to rip 4 or 5 yards on a run, and they were just consistently able to do that the entire game. They had 48 rushes as a team, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But they couldn't stop it. So why would you stop running the football if they can't stop it? And that was my whole frustration, because it was just like it was right there, and I feel like Brian Johnson was trying to outsmart everybody. He wanted Jalen to be a pocket jump, drop back and pick apart the defense with his arm, and then he would run designed runs for Jalen when there really wasn't any kind of fake, and they were just right in the backfield right away. And I was like, oh, it was just so frustrating to watch because he obviously didn't have a monumental game. I mean, he had 193 yards in the air, 1 touchdown, but he went 18 for 23, so it was extremely efficient. Devontae Smith had a monster game. I mean, he had the 131 yards and a touchdown, a couple deep bombs. A.J. Brown had the bomb, too, in the touchdown if it didn't get called back for holding. Dallas Goedert had 6 catches. He was involved keeping in positive play scripts and all that stuff. So you kind of saw that, play out. So I just think that I hope this game was just a wake-up call to Brian Johnson to be like, listen, dude, run the damn ball, because like if you can do that in the National Football League, this is why Buffalo has struggled to take the next step as a team. They can't run the football. So when a defense knows that, they can drop all these people back, and then what's your quarterback going to do? Throw into triple coverage? Like that's what they'll have to do. And that's why San Francisco is always so good. That's why Dallas is always good. That's why these teams who can run the football are always competitive. Even Kansas City, I mean, they have an outlier because they have Patrick Mahomes, but they're always efficient when they run the ball. That's the key. This is what Kevin O'Connell, the head coach of the Vikings, said too. They don't run the ball a ton, but he said he stresses on being efficient when he runs in order to set up play action and all that stuff. And that's what the Eagles were. That's what they need to continue to be. And that's what they need to continue to strive for every single week. And that, that's my big thing about Brian Johnson right now. I think he's doing fine. Obviously it's his first year in the NFL calling plays, first year as an offensive coordinator, although he was on the staff last year. So we'll see kind of how he develops, but I think he needs to rely on that run game. You're talking about probably the last year of Jason Kelce. He's probably going to retire after this year, and then you'll be able to move Cam Jurgens to center, and then probably replace the right guard position. But you got Cam Jurgens at right guard, a young player, at right guard. You have Lane Johnson, probably the best tackle in the league, outside of Trent Williams. They're probably the 2 best tackles, left and right tackle in the league. You got Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata on the left side. Like, I understand they're good at pass protection, but they are even better in run blocking, and you need to utilize that and just really. But even because you look at the Eagles from 2 years ago, we had Devontae Smith was our number 1 receiver, and I don't even know who our number 2 receiver was that year. It might have been Quez, honestly. But Jalen Hurts had not yet taken that step yet. We still had pretty much the same offensive line, and what flipped the switch? We were able to run the ball, and obviously when the playoffs come around and, certain things like that. Obviously, the game against Tampa Bay in 21, we struggled. But when you're able to control the ball with the run game, another thing you're able to do is control the clock. The Eagles in this game had 39 minutes of possession compared to the Vikings 20 minutes. They had double the possession. And when you're talking about a team on the other side of the field, they scored 28 points in 20 minutes. That's an explosive offense over there. They have arguably the best player in the league in Justin Jefferson, who goes for 11 and 159. Their rookie wide receiver from the first round, Jordan Addison, 3 catches, 72 yards, a touchdown. They have one of the best tight ends in the league, TJ Hawkinson, 7 catches, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. You're talking about these guys, like, this is not a scrub team. This is a legit team. I was worried about this game. I said it last week on the pod. If we listened, it's like, we were 6-point favorites after that first week. I didn't love it. I did not love the line, and obviously it ended up pushing, and if you had 6.5, you lost. But this is a team that is explosive offensively. Obviously, defensively, we saw their warts. The Eagles exploited those warts. But the Vikings are more than capable. So when you go up against some of these other teams, like we're going to be playing the Niners later this year. We're going to play the Bills. We're going to play the Chiefs. Obviously the Cowboys twice, the Seahawks. Like, you're talking about really good offenses. I want to keep Josh Allen on the sideline. I want to keep Patrick Mahomes on the sideline. I want to keep Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Brock Purdy. I want to keep them on the sideline. I want to keep CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard on the sideline. I don't want to have to worry about them running up and down the field for 35 minutes when, if the Eagles can push the other team off the ball, continue to get first downs, long drives, win the time of possession battle, And it's not like other sports where, the NBA, there's so many possessions back and forth. The time of possession isn't really like a big stat where there's so many possessions back and forth. The NFL is so important that way because the best player in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, can only see the ball for 20 minutes out of the 60 minutes because the other team is running it and holding the ball and being effective. Granted, Patrick Mahomes can do plenty in 20 minutes, just like Kirk Cousins did in this game, 28 points in 20 minutes. But it's just these little things that I think are so, so, so important for the Eagles to continue to do in order to continue to be successful. Because the passing game will come. I mean, last year was not a fluke. It wasn't just a one-off year. Jalen Hurts is ascending. A.J. Brown's one of the best wide receivers in the league. Devontae Smith is one of the best wide receivers in the league. You're talking about a guy who was a Heisman Trophy winner at the wide receiver position, first-round pick, and has been nothing but on an upward trajectory since he came into the league. And you're talking about A.J. Brown last year who set the franchise record in receiving yardage while also scoring 8+ touchdowns. These guys are ridiculous. Dallas Goedert, one of the best tight ends in the league. If he's not, one of the top 2 or 3, but he is right there in that next group. You're talking about a top 3 weapon, an extending quarterback, and a good offensive line, great offensive line. The passing game will come, but you need to focus on the run game and establish your identity because a team without an identity in the NFL is a losing team. And it's just that simple. Some teams, they don't know who they are. The Bears, they don't know who they are. These teams don't understand where their bread is buttered. And that's why teams consistently, will struggle. With that aspect of the game. So I think for the Eagles, they know they got to run the ball. I hope they looked at the film and just saw. I hope Jeff Stoutland went in there freaking out like, can we run the damn ball? And they just, they went with it and went with it there. So that's my big takeaway from the game. Obviously, we're so far away now from it to talk about specific X's and O's plays. Doesn't really matter. But I think that was a big point I really wanted to hit on in terms of Brian Johnson. I mean, we ran 75 plays to their 55. And another thing about the pass protection, it's the second week in a row we've given up multiple sacks. They sacked Jalen Hurts 4 times in this game. Sped him up on a number of other plays too. So if you can avoid Jalen Hurts taking these hits and all this stuff, I think it's really, really important. So also really wasn't efficient on third down at all. They were 6 for 14, so not great there. Left a lot of drives out there too. So overall, I think Brian Johnson's learning. Obviously, it's phenomenal to be able to teach in a win. This is something Nick Sirianni said after the game. He's like, I'm happy that all this is coming into winning because we have a lot to teach and it'll make guys a little, more receptive in meetings when we're going to get in them because he said, listen, it's everybody, it's coaches, it's players, and they're going to get in these guys. And, it's a little easier to do when you're 2-0 and you're sitting, near the top of the conference in terms of record. So I think that's just really, really important. That's pretty much my main takeaway from the game moving forward. Coming up next, the Eagles have the Buccaneers. The Eagles have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. This is going to be an interesting game. Buccaneers 2-0. Very, very interesting. Their defense is a little banged up. They had a couple guys out last week. Levante David missed their game against the Bears. Carlton Davis missed last week against the Bears. Defensive tackle Kalijah Cansey missed last week. They had a couple guys who were in and out. Did Levante practice or did Levante play or not? I gotta check that out. But regardless, this is a team that's better than we thought. I think is one of the main takeaways that I think I'll go with here because they're 2-0. A lot of people thought they would be one of the worst teams in the league this year. Obviously, Tom Brady retiring, but you look at it, a lot of the core is still there for Tampa Bay. Their offensive line is healthier than it was last year. Rashad White is a solid running back. Mike Evans is still one of the best receivers in the league. Chris Godwin's one of the best possession, move the chains receivers, in the league. Their defense is still very, very solid. Obviously, like I mentioned, Levante David. Who is their other linebacker? Of course, I'm blanking I'm blanking on his name. It'll come to me. But their defensive line, phenomenal. Like, they have a lot of just dudes on their defense. I'm looking up the depth chart right now because I want to give these guys justice because they are a very, very good defense. Vita Vea at nose tackle, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. Devin White is the other linebacker, along with Levante David. Shaquille Barrett on the outside linebacker. Phenomenal second-level defenders. And then you also have Carlton Davis at cornerback, Jamel Dean at cornerback, Antoine Winfield Jr. at safety. Like, this is a legit defense with a legit head coach. Now, I'm blanking on all these names right now. I got so many names in my head. A legit coach, and they're playing with confidence. They're 2-0. Obviously, their schedule hasn't necessarily been the most difficult. Obviously, they beat the Bears in week 2, which I'll get to in a few minutes. And then they did beat the Vikings in Minnesota in week 1. That was a big win for the Buccaneers. But obviously, we saw last week with the Eagles, our susceptible defense. But good on the Buccaneers defense for holding. They've 2 straight weeks they've held the teams to 17 points. So that is important because they're limiting their opponents. They're limiting their opponent's output, but at the same time, still being able to score the ball too. Mike Evans has been absolutely on fire. Baker Mayfield has instilled some confidence in the team, and everyone's just been feeding off that. So they're a dangerous team. This is week 2 at home for them. They beat the Bears at home last week, and this week is their second home game. Monday Night Football, prime time. It's going to be loud in there. But at the end, and this is where, we're talking about styles. I just mentioned how we need to rely on the run game. We have to go really into that. Well, the defensive line is phenomenal for the Buccaneers. Vita Vea is really, really good. That matchup with Jason Kelce is going to be the film guys in the NFL are going to absolutely love this game because of that. Shaquille Barrett obviously off the edge against Lane Johnson and Malata. The linebackers against the interior line. Like, the line of scrimmage is going to be a phenomenal game. A phenomenal battle between those two units. Obviously, I think the Eagles hold the advantage offensively. I don't love Baker Mayfield. He's been prone to turn the ball over, but is a legit starter in this league. As much as people don't like him, I think he's a legit starter. Maybe he's not like a top 20 quarterback in the league, but he gets the job done. Honestly, he can move the ball. He's accurate. When he's playing with confidence, he trusts his arm and he can make throws that a lot of people can't make. He pushes the ball down the field, which is something that I think is questionable with the Eagles right now. Obviously, Avonte Maddox tore his pec. Sounds like he's going to be out for the year, which is a huge loss. There is confidence that James Bradbury should be returning from a concussion this week. So you should have Slay and Bradbury on the outside. There's optimism that Reed Blankenship will be back as well to play on that back end. So hopefully you have some troops returning. The slot is going to be an issue. Chris Godwin against whoever our slot corner we decide to go with is going to be interesting. Side note on that discussion, in training camp, there was a little storyline that a lot of people kind of didn't pick up and didn't really talk about much, but was James Bradbury's use as a slot cornerback. Sean Desai, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, tried him out. He made him train a little bit in the slot and, wanted to see how he could defend there. And I think we could see a little bit of James Bradbury in the slot in this game specifically. Maybe some more Josh Jobe on the outside, Eli Ricks on the outside, 2 younger guys, more of outside corners as opposed to working in the slot. And then James Bradbury can maybe exclusively play against Chris Godwin when he's on the inside in the slot and they have an outside receiver. Josh Jobe, maybe he'll take that guy on the outside and kind of see how that plays. I think that is a very interesting thing to keep track on. Make sure we're looking for that matchup because that's going to be a monster thing there. Let me see if I can get a line for this game because I don't even know. I haven't even seen the line. Philly minus 5.5 on the road. I think it's a great line, first of all. Just knee-jerk seeing the line for the first time. Over-unders 46. I would probably take the Eagles to cover. I think they're going to probably win by a touchdown. But I just don't want to discount this team. Because once you start taking your opponents lightly in the NFL is when you get punched in the mouth and get a concussion, and then you're like, next thing you know, it's week 7 and you're 2-5, and you're like, what the hell just happened? So I think that I if I was betting it, I would take them to cover, but I want to see more. I think it's important to start off any discussion about the Eagles with they're 2-0. They're winning these games. They've looked good in spurts in the games too. So it's not like we're just playing terribly and we're winning somehow, like we're overachieving. We're still playing well, but there is some nits to pick when you're talking about a team who is the favorite to come out of the NFC. Like there's things they got to clean up, but I think it's important, like I said, how they're winning games so they're able to really self-correct without guys getting in their feelings like, well, he didn't do this or he didn't do that. That's why we lost. No, we're winning. So you need to step up because we need you to be in the right spot doing the right thing to continue to win when other things don't go our way. When Kirk Cousins and the Vikings don't turn the ball over 4 times, and maybe we turn it over twice and don't take any away, how are you going to respond? Those certain things I think have to be buffed out, and it's important that they're getting that way now while we're getting the win. So I think it's really, really I think it's going to be a great game. I'm really, really excited. 7:15 on Monday night. Like I said, I would probably take the Eagles to cover, but not super excited about it, to say the least. So that'll kind of wrap up our discussion about the Eagles against the Vikings last week, and then kind of a little preview of the Buccaneers game. So now we'll kind of just talk, just on a couple games around the league last week, and kind of see where, kind of see what we learned in week 2. What's something that we learned in week 2? Number 1, the Bills bounced back in an incredible way. Nothing that we really didn't see coming. I don't really expect the Raiders to be phenomenal this year. And, they went into Buffalo and they got pretty much destroyed. I mean, Buffalo's defense was outstanding in this game. Vegas scored a touchdown in the first quarter, a field goal in the second, and then didn't score the rest of the game. James Cook, this is what I mentioned with Buffalo. James Cook looked great on the ground for Buffalo, 17 carries for 123 yards. They trusted the run game a little bit more. Josh Allen was a much, much more efficient, 31 of 37 through the air. So this is the team that they can be. This is the team that they can be consistently. It just comes down to whether or not they will consistently run the football. I think James Cook is a super explosive player. I think he can be a phenomenal in terms of where running backs rank. He can be right up there with the best of them, but it just comes down to if they trust him enough to be that guy. So great win by the Buffalo Bills. Ravens Bengals, crazy game in Cincinnati. Cincinnati drops to 0-2 for the second straight year, and it was pretty much it was another ugly game for Cincinnati. Now, I don't want to be super pessimistic on the Bengals, even though they didn't look phenomenal. I mean, Joe Burrow didn't look great, 27-41. Also came out of this game, with a re-aggravation of his calf injury that he struggled with in training camp and all that stuff. So that will be something to monitor. They didn't guarantee that he was playing next week. They said that, we're not sure right now, and you never like to hear that, especially right after a game. So, it was good to see T. Higgins get more involved after no catches in week 1. He goes out and gets 8 for 89 and 2 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, he had 8 targets, 5 for 31, just really didn't get it going. The offense in general was really struggling. And on the flip side, Baltimore looked pretty good. Obviously they lost J.K. Dobbins, but Lamar looked pretty good, 24-33 for 237 and 2, so not phenomenal. But still pretty good. A little bit over 66% completion percentage. So they liked how he was being with the ball. They ran the ball really well, 178 yards on the ground. Gus Edwards looked good. Lamar did his thing. Justice Hill looked good on the ground. So their receiving game was a lot better with Mark Andrews back in the fold. He obviously missed week 1. And it was great to see him back in the fold for week 2. Baltimore looked a little more comfortable. I want to see... going back to my predictions coming into the year, I did have the Bengals at number 1 in the division, but Baltimore was right there, number 2. And honestly, as of right now, Baltimore's got to be the favorite moving forward. The Pittsburgh-Cleveland game last night didn't do anything to make me confident one way or the other in either one of those teams. And obviously the Bengals have demons to fight themselves. So I think the Ravens they're set up right now. They're set up right now to do really, really good and continue that. They have the Colts at home this week. So, they're favored by 8 points. You would think, obviously anything can happen. You would think they win that game, and then you kind of look forward. I'll just go a couple weeks out just to kind of see what the rest of their schedule looks like. Week 4, they go to Cleveland, so that is going to be a major test for them. Cleveland's defense looks very, very good, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. So, they got the Colts at home, and then they go to Cleveland, then to Pittsburgh, so 2 big divisional matchups. Then they come home for a 2-step against Tennessee and Detroit before going to Arizona. So, there's some runway here for the Ravens to start 6-1, 5-2, and to really stamp themselves in the AFC North to be the team to beat. So a healthy Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews healthy. The weapons that they have on the outside are starting to play really well. Their defense has been phenomenal, and will continue to be as long as as long as they continue to play well, I guess. But with the personnel that they have. So that's going to be really, really fun to watch. Quickly, a little AFC North recap, with obviously the Steelers and the Browns played on Monday night last night. First off, I feel terrible for Nick Chubb. I mean, that was just an absolutely gruesome injury. I mean, you plant all your weight on that leg and then get hit pretty much right on the kneecap. I mean, it's about as fluke as anything can happen, and it was really just tough to see to one of the absolute best running backs in the league. Jerome Ford looked good as his backup, but I think that had more to do with the fact that nobody really had seen him. Nobody really understood what he could do. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Deshaun Watson looked okay again last night, so I'm not really super sold on them. Pittsburgh Steelers offense looked gross. I mean, they scored 14 points on defense. So, they scored 2 defensive touchdowns, so that pretty much won them the game. I'm really not confident with Pittsburgh either, so I think the ceiling overall, Baltimore's shown that their ceiling is about as higher as, is higher than it pretty much gets right there. So a couple other things we'll touch on as we move through here. The Bears just absolutely looked atrocious. I mean, Justin Fields, I don't know. A lot of people were saying he's the next Jalen Hurts. He's going to take a Jalen Hurts step this year. They went out and they got DJ Moore, and they're going to be so much better as a team. But when it comes down to it, Fields just hasn't improved. And I don't know what it is. I know it's only week 2, and last year they did show a willingness to change their ways, and Fields looked a lot better as the year went on. But I just don't know. I still have a lot of faith in Justin Fields, both athletically and as a passer. It just looks like he's not processing the game at a speed in which is necessary to be an elite quarterback in the NFL. And I do think a lot of that is coaching. I do think some of it is on Justin Fields. You can't just excuse a lot of the mistakes he's making, but I think a lot of it is on coaching, and, you saw what Brian Daboll did for Josh Allen, and then he leaves, and Josh Allen starts to get a little bit more wild. Obviously, what Shane Steichen did with Jalen Hurts last year, and what he's shown so far with Anthony Richardson, coaching matters. Anthony Richardson obviously left the game with concussion, but he's looked great. He's looked better than Justin Fields through 2 games, and it's because he has a legit coach. So I think that, hopefully they change their ways and they decide to get out. They decide to help him a little bit more. I think that'll be great. I think that'll be really, really good for him as they kind of move through. A couple other NFC North storylines. The Lions lost a thriller to Seattle in overtime at home. I think this is going to kind of be Detroit all season. I kind of think they'll finish 10-7, 9-8. They'll compete against good teams. They're always going to be competitive in every game, but I was excited to kind of see Seattle look the way they did. The Packers ended up losing a game to the Falcons at home. This was a game that I kind of was anticipating to see, a step back for the Packers. I think they will be good. I'm up on them in the preseason. I'm excited about them as a team, kind of moving forward, and even with Jordan Love, I'm excited to see kind of his potential. They were without Aaron Jones in this game, so probably their best offensive player. So that was, a big reason why maybe they didn't look as good as they could have. But they go into Atlanta. It's going to be a tough place to play with, the running backs they have, the scheme they run. And Desmond Ridder, played a mistake-free football game. They only lost by 1. It was a game-winning field goal at the end and had the ball in the fourth quarter to win it. So I think they'll be fine. But, there's some stuff to take away from that game. And then the NFC North, the other, obviously the Vikings lost the Eagles. And then, we talked about the Lions and the Bears. So a couple other things there. The Cowboys look great. Talk about the NFC for a few minutes. Cowboys look absolutely phenomenal. I don't think they will be this dominant all year. They played probably two of the worst, maybe not two of the worst, but the wheels fell off for the Giants in week 1, and they just kind of put it on them. And then the Jets with Zach Wilson are probably one of the worst offenses in the league. So you expected them to kind of feast there. It will be interesting to kind of see how their defense responds as the year goes on. But they're a legit team. There's no doubt about it. Their defense is legit, but it's kind of the same story as last year. Defense is absolutely phenomenal, and their offense is doing enough to continue to put up points. So we'll see there. The Giants had an unreal comeback. They came back from 21 points down. It's the largest comeback in franchise history. Was at the Cardinals. So obviously they deserve a ton of credit for coming back from a 21-point deficit, but obviously the Cardinals aren't going to be the best team in the NFL this year. We'll have to monitor Saquon's ankle injury. Obviously the key cog of their offense is going to more than likely miss this week, although Brian Daboll said he wasn't going to rule him out yet. So it was, they said he was going to miss 3 weeks yesterday, and now Daboll's saying there's a chance he plays this week. I think he sits this week out and maybe comes back next week, but it will be something to monitor with his ankle injury. And then the Commanders go into Denver and win up to 2-0. I was been in on the Commanders, man, and I really wanted to put them over. My hot take coming into it into the year was the Commanders were going to finish second in the NFC East behind the Eagles. And as the preseason as the last couple weeks of the preseason unfolded, I kind of backed off it a little bit because I was like, that might be a little too hot. But this is a Commanders team that runs the ball really well, has weapons on the outside. Sam Howell looks competent. And their defense has the potential to play with anybody in the league. Obviously, they gave up 33 points. They gave up the Hail Mary at the end and almost, lost this game in overtime if Denver would have got that 2-point conversion and pushed it to overtime. But, they look good. They beat the Cardinals in week 1 and then the Broncos in week 2. So, not phenomenal wins all around, but, you can only play who's ahead of you. Same thing with Dallas. You can only play who's ahead of you. Same thing with the Giants. You can only play who's ahead of you. So, all really, really good games for the NFC East. Every single team won. And then just to kind of wrap up the show, I'll talk about two different I guess I'll touch on a couple teams here. The Chargers, real quick, I'll talk about. I think the days of Brandon Staley are numbered in LA. I mean, their team is putting up great offensive numbers with Kellen Moore, and their defense is atrocious. And Brandon Staley's supposed to be a defensive head coach. So when your side of the ball as a head coach, usually you say there's an offensive head coach who likes to call plays, or you have a defensive head coach like, Mike Tomlin or something like that. Like, your defense should be the backbone of your team. And yet that is the side of the ball that's losing them games. So I could see Brandon Staley on the hot seat real soon. The Rams, I just did want to touch on real quick. The Rams, I mean, they look great. I think a lot of people kind of just thought they were, the last 2 years have been complete opposite. They won the Super Bowl and then they were, had 5 wins in back-to-back years. So I think a lot of people didn't really know what to make. A lot of their stars were getting older. So a lot of people kind of thought they would take a step back, and me included, I have them at 3rd in the AFC West in my preseason predictions. I had them right on the cusp of the playoffs. I had the Packers end up making the playoffs over them. Although they look great. Matt Stafford looks great. Cooper Kupp hasn't even been playing, but Puka Nacua looks great for them. Tutu Atwell, their receivers look phenomenal. They're going to have to fix their running game. They're relying on Kyron Williams after probably going to put Cam Akers on the trade block, which is just super weird. But they look good. Their defense looks good. Aaron Donald looks good. Obviously, they lost this week to the 49ers, but I'm pretty sure the 49ers have beat them like 8 or 9 times in a row. So I'm not going to hate on them for losing to one of the NFC favorites. But I think they're going to be very, very good as the year goes on. They're going to challenge the Seahawks. I picked the Seahawks to win the division, the Niners number 2. The Rams are legit. I think they're going to play. And once they get Cooper Kupp back, they're going to be explosive on offense, and they're going to be able to compete with anybody in the league. And then the last team I wanted to touch on here is the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins should be the favorite in the AFC West moving forward. I had them at number 3 coming into this year. Obviously, that was mainly because of Aaron Rodgers popped his Achilles. They dropped off completely. They could finish behind the Patriots, honestly. And then my issues with Miami was the run game. Run game looks great. Raheem Mostert just ran for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns on Bill Belichick's defense. Tua's health, he looks great so far. And then the defensive health, and that'll only get better as the year goes on. So I think they should be the favorite. Buffalo has some holes, it looks like. New England obviously doesn't have the ceiling, and the Jets have Zach Wilson at quarterback. So the Miami Dolphins should 100% be in the lead for the AFC East. And honestly, barring any injuries, Jalen Waddle just got the concussion last week in the Sunday night game, so we'll see how that monitors. But their run game looks great. Tyreek looks phenomenal. Jalen Waddle looks great. Tua looks great. Their defense looks good. They should be the favorites, and it's simple as that. They look really, really good, and I'm they're going to be a legit force in the AFC. There's no doubt about it. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for the show today. So we're probably going to do the recaps every Tuesday. Keep an eye out for our Substack post coming a little bit later this week, the Fantasy Football Notebook for Week 2. And then once again, check the description below for all our social media handles. Feel free to shoot us any questions. If you got them, we'll answer them live on the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys back here again next time.